What's going on, everyone? It's Rick Barrett, and welcome back to the Barrett Breakdown, a show where we cut through the noise, drop the talking points, and have real conversations that actually matter. Now, if this is your first time here, if you've been listening to these for a long time, you're going to have to know that I don't play it safe. I'm here to ask questions most people avoid, and more importantly, I want to give my guests the space to truly flesh out their answers. There's no gotcha questions, there's no stomping over each other here. Whether it's politics, culture, faith, freedom, gaming, whatever the subject may take us, the show is about honest talk from real people who aren't afraid to challenge whatever narrative they've decided to challenge, which there are many to challenge in today's world. Now, today's guest is someone you're definitely going to want to hear from, Dennis Brennan. He's an author, an attorney, and a historian who explores the intersection of politics, justice, and history. By the end of this conversation, I hope you're going to think about those topics and areas a whole lot differently. So sit back, grab a drink, grab a smoke, grab a snack, because the Barrett Brief is starting right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard the intro. Without further ado, let us bring to the program Mr. Dennis Brennan. Mr. Brennan, thank you for spending some time with us this evening. How are you?
I'm great, and thanks for having me, Rick. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure's all mine. Now, your book that's out, the DC Swamp Strikes Back, Aaron Burr, Donald Trump, and their similar battles. It catches the eye very quickly due to the fact that you picked Aaron Burr of all historical figures in American history, who seems to be the most reviled and misunderstood, all at the same time due to popular musicals like Hamilton and so forth. What drove or what inspired? I don't want to say drove. What inspired you to pick Burr and compare him to Trump?
It was an accident, really. A friend of mine wrote a book about Burr, brought it to my office, and gave me a copy and said, "Here, read this." I was amazed he wrote a book. Hey, you wrote a book? He's a bright guy, although he's a political consultant for the Democrats, does congressional races, big races. I read the book. It was well written, of course, but he came back a few weeks later and he said, "So what do you think?" And I said, "Book well written, great job, and I'm amazed you wrote a book." And I said, "But I've got a beef here. I think I didn't know all this about Aaron Burr, but what I see, the way Aaron Burr was treated, is similar to how Donald Trump has been treated." And at that time, Trump hadn't won the second, presidency. So he looked at me like Democrats often look at Republicans and vice versa, like I had two heads. He did not see the correlation at all. And I said, "Well, they're not exactly alike, but there's some real similarities here." And he said that I'm nuts. So I said, "Well, you know what? I'm going to write a book." And I started researching Burr. And I started out, with what everybody knows, right, from grade school and maybe Hamilton the musical.
Hmm.
Burr shot Hamilton during a duel. That's pretty much what everybody remembers. And Hamilton died. Most people don't remember anything else about Burr, and he's an interesting guy who, much like Trump, is interesting, maybe the most interesting guy we've had in our lifetime. But these two different politicians have a lot of similarities in both how they're reviled, and also the fans that they've had over the years.
Yeah. Especially since the historical curriculum in education has truncated most of American history into a paragraph or two. The only time anybody ever heard about somebody like Aaron Burr was, hey, he shot Hamilton and then he went on the run. He was vice president too. So yeah, that was kind of fun.
Right.
Nothing really substantial. And so we're talking about the similarities between the two of them as far as fans and political opponents and some of the things that they faced. So an idea that people tend to say, and since you're a historian, I can throw this your way and see if I'm finally correct it or not. I always, as I know I'm going to shock you here. I'm a male with a history degree. I don't know if that shocks you very much, because it's very rare to find a man with a history degree. But history does not repeat, but it often rhymes, because it can't repeat, but it can rhyme in many ways. So what rhymes as far as things that surrounded Burr during his time versus what Trump has been dealing with his first term, with the lawfare, and then with his second term? Because what I'm hearing from you is the swamp is not a new concept when it comes to American governance.
Right. And that's a good place to start, because there's a lot to it. The swamp, there have been other books that have talked about having several different swamps over the years. Reagan on fighting the bureaucracy. John F. Kennedy fought with the CIA, and those deep state individuals. I would say the swamp is bigger than just the deep state. It includes the media and everybody who spends time in Washington, lobbyists and so forth, business interests even. So, and unions now. I think, Burr had the problem of dealing with what I would call the Virginia mafia. Virginians had this idea that it would be Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and so forth, that they pretty much would never go up the presidency or have it for, a good 2 or 3 decades. Burr kind of was the guy that would upset all that, even though he gets very little credit for really getting Jefferson elected. Jefferson ran, the first time he ran against Adams, Jefferson lost, but he became the vice president because we had a crazy system then. And he was the second highest vote getter, not the VP candidate for Adams. So Burr, went back to New York. Again, another New Yorker like Trump. He went back to New York, and instead of pouting about it, he sat down and figured out, well, how do we win this election next time? Fully understanding that he was going to be the VP candidate again. He went back there and elected General Assembly members, legislators, because at that time, it wasn't based on the votes of the people for electoral votes. It was however your state assemblyman voted. So you had to get your party. He did do that. He elected individuals who were going to be with him and Jefferson. And sure enough, when the next election came along, Adams ran again, Jefferson ran again. Burr again was a VP candidate with Jefferson, and New York switched over. And, Burr basically doesn't get the credit, but he's the one that brought Jefferson in. Unfortunately for Burr, they tied. Burr and Jefferson tied, and another problem that we had at the beginning of the country, which seems insane, that the vice president and president candidate tie. So there's another vote now in Congress. And so Burr gets his first taste of politics with, Jefferson making deals to become president, where Burr again went back to New York and didn't do anything. He took some heat from those Virginians who, would say, you should stand up and actually drop out of this thing and let Jefferson be president, which, a lot of us say we would do, but honestly, if you had a chance to be president, you probably would take it. Yeah. And you'd say, well, if it goes my way, I'm taking it. And I think that's kind of what Burr did. So, at that point, he was making more enemies and maybe not knowing it. And I think there's a similarity with Trump. Trump went there like everybody's friend. When Burr, first came to Washington, he was kind of an unknown. They had liked some things he did, but he wasn't really known as, a big force in politics. Much like Trump, he was just a celebrity, developer. And I think maybe naively, they both thought, oh, you get there and then everybody just is your friend. Turns out nobody's your friend. And that's where you get into the rhyming of history, as you say. There's many people that talk about how they go to Washington and realize that.
Yeah, exactly. And ironically enough, what we're seeing, Dennis, is a repudiation right now within the Republican Party of the swamp. The biggest thing was the fact that Trump has been going back and forth with Massey and with Paul to stand out. Despite what you think about them, those guys are rock solid, conservatives, libertarians, whatever you want to call them. They represent the state of Kentucky, ironically enough, and they represent it well. They represent the interests of their people. Now you have Marjorie Taylor Greene on a Friday night at 7 p.m. just kind of throw out a video being like, yeah, I quit. Bye. And now you're hearing rumbles from some of the conservative reporters inside the swamp, inside the DC Beltway, saying this is actually going to be a massive event. A lot of Republicans are in Congress, are sick of what Johnson is doing. They're not very happy with what he is doing, and they're just going to retire because they have no voice, no say in what they were elected to go to DC for. Nothing's happening, despite the fact you have Trump yelling essentially at the Senate to nuke the filibuster to get stuff passed and to actually do some things instead of do what the Senate does best, which is nothing. So it's very interesting right now to see that we have the swamp really just taking its toll on all of these people, because we felt Trump coming in 2024, he won. There's the mandate. Populism is going to sweep through, and we're going to see once in a lifetime legislation with Trump. How can he not get his agenda passed? They passed a big, beautiful bill in the Lake and Riley Act, and that's the only things they've done. So we're seeing that. And I don't know if you're picking up on this, if you've noticed this, but within the last couple months, whether it's the economy or whatever the case may be, people have just checked out of the political landscape. It almost feels like, Dennis, people have kind of finally tossed their hand up, especially on the Republican side, and just said they gave up. I don't know if you caught that or what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a good example. It's hard to get into her head and decide, okay, why is she really resigning? I mean, one of the funny things, or maybe sad, it's funny in a way, but a weird way. When you find out, I had no idea you only had to serve 5 years in Congress to get a $175,000 pension. I would have tried harder to be in politics. Like, that is the sweetest deal in the world. Not to mention all the stock they seem to be able to buy at great prices.
Yeah.
But, some of that stuff, it is amazing because you've got the filibuster. I've always been one to think, okay, maybe you need that, but it does stop everything. And if Trump can't get it done, who else is going to get anything done there? I mean, and maybe this is reminiscent of like Reagan too. How much do you really get done except in foreign policy? I mean, maybe that's why everybody spends their time doing foreign policy. When you can have your own people do it, that's one thing. But when you have to deal with, 100 senators and you've got to get the 60, which is almost impossible because the other party votes against everything you want to do.
Yeah.
And then you have the House. And I see now, I think it's today it came out, Trump has been talking about extending the tax credits for what's known as Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
And now Johnson's telling the White House, hit the brakes. That's not going to pass. The House is against it. So you have a lot of these, House members, Republicans saying, I'm not voting for that. I don't know if that's their way of, shooting back and saying, I'm not going along with this. It's not some, a lot of those people went to Washington, I think to your point, saying they're going to make sure Obamacare is not extended. They're going to get rid of it. Forget about extending it. And now, the president's talking about an extension for 2 years. I mean, I think he has some modifications in there as far as who gets it and so forth. But as I read it, I think it would go back to how it was before COVID. So it would deal with the poverty level. And, so I could see where you'd be disgusted if you're in the House. And if you're a voter, voters believe, you look at what the voters, especially the Republican Party, thought. There's Epstein files they're going to name, acts that were done with children. and we're going to get those files out of the office and throw them out there, and everybody will see that. Now, how did they get that idea? The politicians running for office said it, right? They all said, well, yeah, when I'm in there, I'll release the files. Well, now they backtrack saying, well, there's actually no files. There's many different names and, interviews, and okay, what do you really have? We still don't know. And I could see where voters would become distressed and uninterested. If the people you put in, you have control of the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and it appears nothing gets done, you start to think, why am I involved? Why am I even voting? And that's a problem.
It's a huge problem, especially when you have something as it should be a home run on all sides, something like an Epstein list, where children have been hurt, and it should be a no-brainer, a slam dunk to get this done. But now it's devolved into a political weapon because the Democrats are saying, oh, we're going to release our version of the files, and these are the redacted names. It's like, well, what did you do for 4 years while you had control of everything? Why didn't you release them then? And now Trump has gone through probably, and Trump is very media savvy, but somehow Trump in his 2 terms has managed to put some of the most media incapable people around him. It's actually quite hysterical because I don't know how. This is my personal opinion. I think Pam Bondi is an utter disaster as an AG on many different fronts, and as a lawyer, you can speak to that. But the fact that she's going to come out and say that she has it, then they do the binder, then Trump goes through this litany of, if you like the Epstein files, you're not a supporter of mine. It's a hoax. It doesn't exist. Okay, maybe it does exist. Okay, yeah, it does exist. Okay, release something now, and one of Trump's biggest assets is the fact that he is reactive to his supporting base. If his supporting base kind of flares up and wants something done, he'll try to address it. But at the same time, it just seems to be the back and forth between all of this has just been frustrating to a lot of his base, because it's like, just release the stupid thing. It's not that hard. Just do it. You can just do things. And so the fact is that he seems to be held back. It doesn't know. And then he has his administration led by Pam Bondi, who she has to own this failure because she's the one who dropped it. She was the one who started the whole thing with that they're on my desk and I'm releasing them Monday. And then everybody Monday came and said, all right, where are they? And she went, wait, what? What do you mean, where are they? So
right. I was talking about the file folder, not an actual list. Well, and I think, Trump was kind of in a tough situation, right? Because he had Jeff Sessions last time.
Yeah.
That, someone should have mentioned, and I don't expect Trump to know, there's conflicts for attorneys. And if you have a conflict, you're going to be out of the case. That's a problem for him. Sessions should have said something. Of course, again, it gets down to the point, much like, would I be president? I guess if I know I'm not going to be attorney general, if I open my mouth, maybe I'm Jeff Sessions and don't open my mouth and tell him the truth. But I got to think you take a different position. Then he had Bill Barr, who was part of the, long-standing Washington elite, who I don't think did him any good as attorney general. Might be a brilliant lawyer, but he wasn't a very good AG for Trump. And, so now he goes with Pam Bondi figuring, this is someone that's going to be loyal. Personally, I had thought there were other people. I like Ron DeSantis. I like Abbott out of Texas. Yeah. I mean, I think, the thing about Abbott that I credit him kind of, with the immigration issue becoming such a big deal, shipping illegals up to, I'm in Illinois, up to Chicago, up to, Philadelphia, up to New York. It made people on both the Republican side and Democrats, mostly the Democrats, who were like, wait a minute, what's going on here? As if they didn't know this happened in Texas all the time, or Arizona. This was a daily, way of life. But now all of a sudden we're seeing it. And a lot of those services were being taken from people that, voted Democrat basically in those cities. And I know others joined in, but it seemed like Abbott was the first one to do it. And I think that guy's got a brilliant mind and would be a great attorney general, but, or some position. Um,
Well,
you
we
know, and
thought down here he's my governor, and it was clear as day that the guy was angling for some kind of federal position
mhm.
within the second Trump term. I mean, he has been as MAGA as it gets. As soon as Trump is anywhere near the state of Texas, he is make sure that he's taking as many photos with him as possible. I think he definitely wanted that AG spot, and I actually agree. I think he would have been. He was a former Supreme Court justice here in the state of Texas on the state Supreme Court, Attorney General, Governor. I think he would have been. I think it would have been great than somebody like I don't know. Bondi just doesn't seem like she's ready for that position. She may be a fine lawyer, and I know Trump likes her because she defended him in the
Mhm.
impeachment case. And loyalty to Trump, especially in the second term, is probably his number one priority, which is why you're seeing guys like Cash and all these other people doing just awfully dumb things. And Trump doesn't care because if they're loyal to him, then you can make as many mistakes as possible. But yes, I think DeSantis. I think it would. I'm of two minds. Yes, he would have been great, but I still really loved seeing what DeSantis is doing in Florida. I really wish every Republican governor would just copy whatever he does. Just copy what he does and do it in your state and just make it work.
Well, yeah, well, we'll have to see what he does now because it appears, after running for the presidency, and I have to tell you, I find it amazing that Trump was able to overcome so many, the lawfare that was there. I mean, we go back to that, and there's in the book I break down all those cases, and it's amazing that all that can be thrown at somebody and he still comes out of it and wins. I mean,
Mm.
and those that supported him would say, well, I was always supporting him. It didn't matter. I myself thought he's not going to be able to win. There's
Mm.
He's not going to be able to get through this. And I thought DeSantis would. That was clear in Iowa, though. No, this is wrong. I'm off track here. These people are not leaving Trump. And I don't know if the Democrats figured that out at that point, but I think, you know, they all of a sudden realized, boy, we should have filed those cases earlier because we're going to have a problem. And I think, DeSantis would have been a good president, but the people weren't going to go away from Trump. And I like Trump, so I don't have a problem with that. It's just now I wonder, with term limits in Florida, where does DeSantis go? And
Mm.
unfortunately,
Finish your point, sir.
well, unfortunately, that's where, it leaves sometimes. Many of us have always wanted term limits, but then you get someone who I think he's a great governor, and okay, now he's done. What do you do? I mean, that's the reality. I guess you could go into business or go on TV or whatever, but most people that are at that level in politics, they want to keep advancing and stay in politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually the exact same opposite. Abbott just filed to run for governor for I think the 1400th time because we don't have term limits here in Texas. But somebody like DeSantis is an amazing politician, but a terrible public person. He just doesn't have the charisma. He does when he's talking about laws or he's debating the press or he's talking about property taxes being eliminated. He has that charisma there, but going up against a guy like Trump, who is nothing but he's 100% charisma all the time, you just can't. You're going to get steamrolled on that. And I think he got pushed in. A lot of us were just saying, stay out of this one, Ron. Don't go in and finish out your term, do well, and then set yourself up for 2028. And I think some insiders in DC, the anti-Trump Republicans, the National Review, and a bunch of those kind of people who just could never stand Trump to begin with, who have only gotten back on his side because he's in office now. I think they
Mhm.
pushed Ron as the alternative,
Yeah.
and I voted for Trump 3 times, and I was going to vote for him just to kind of like stick it to DC. That's kind of what it was. It was like just a stick it vote. Like, all right, you can do whatever. You can put every kind of lawsuit on this guy and put these. And I want to ask you about the New York case in particular, the one that everybody wants to reference, the 34 felony one, and how much of a nonsensical legal case that is. And you
Mhm.
can stick as many of these criminal charges on him. I'm still going to vote for him. I would have voted for him from prison. Dennis, just to really stick it to DC. And none of these other candidates had any kind of momentum behind them in that regard.
Right. They didn't. I mean, Trump's a force of nature. And
Mhm.
while DeSantis might understand the issues better, I'm not sure he understands the people better. I don't know if
No,
anybody does, or
no,
at least the people that are in the Republican Party. And yeah, for DeSantis, yeah, he has all the right moves, but a lot of guys have gone national and failed. You know, it's
yeah,
you do have to have some kind of charisma, and you know, like it or not, Bill Clinton had charisma. You know,
amazing.
I mean,
Yep.
people. I mean, if you can actually, you know, have an intern in your office and walk out of there without really damaging yourself. I mean, yeah, you lost your law license, but his career, you know, his wife ran for president after that. It's like, you
Yeah, she
know,
became a senator. She
yeah,
actually became a senator, then the Secretary of State, and then ran for president. So
you
it
would have
didn't
thought,
damage him at all. At all.
yeah, you would have thought the whole family would be blackballed. Like, it's okay,
Mm,
you're done. You can't, you can't credit anything that this guy has charisma. And it goes maybe to like Trump saying he could shoot someone on, you know, Park Avenue and get away with it. And it's like, I don't know if you could do that. You probably can't get away with it, but you would have some people saying he didn't do it, someone else did, because the way politics has become, we see our own people that we support as, you know, without fault. It's like,
yeah.
okay, we'll back them. And even if we think they're at fault, it's like, well, there's a reason for that. You give them such a benefit of the doubt on most issues. And I think that's, you see with Marjorie Taylor Greene, where there was a dispute, boy, that thing blew up.
Yeah, that was. It's a shame that Trump takes those things personally. That's one thing about him is that he'll take it personally for a little bit, and then if you just give him like 20 minutes and McDonald's cheeseburger, and that's not even a joke because I love them myself. You give him one of those, and he's just like, "All right, we're fine." And it's sad to see in that regard. So let's go to the lawfare aspect. You mentioned that earlier, Mr.
Yeah.
Brennan. The one that everybody on the Democratic side, they want to latch on to that 34 felony count. He's a felon. Even though he's never been actually, you know,
Yeah.
sentenced to it, but the fact
Right.
he's been charged, well, he's a felon, he's this, he's that. And from somebody with legal training like yourself, you kind of just have to shake your head like, okay, that's just a talking point there. I mean, I don't know, how do you even try to break down, or do you even take the time to try and explain to people anymore? Or do you just kind of shrug off on it?
Well, yeah, I kind of try to make it simple. In the book, we break it down. You know, it's because, you know, we're talking about with this felon stuff. It's like you're taking, you know, cases, you know, it's a document case, basically. It's you entered something on the document that you shouldn't have. And in this case, it was a legal expense. He paid his lawyer. But, you know, they turn it into a felony by taking a federal law on reporting campaign expenditures. It's never been done before, which should raise red flags for anybody that thinks about fairness in the justice system. It's like you shouldn't be looking at the idea that you can convict someone, you know, we'll get them on something. This isn't Al Capone, for crying out loud, right? We're trying to get somebody, you know, and convict them of, you know, they talk about all these felonies. It's really, if anything, it's one felony, which they didn't list. They didn't really tell you what the felony is, but it is the reporting of the expenditures. It's just the jury was allowed to pick out of three and not tell us which one it was. And the the honest truth is it's a misdemeanor. It's something that most people, you would say, okay, it's a business misdemeanor, pay the fine, correct your documents, and let's go. We're done. You don't go to
Yeah.
trial on that. And I think the problem, you know, they have, and, you know, the prosecutors were so hell bent on getting Trump that they basically made the case up to come in and say, hey, he's got 34 felonies now. And they thought that would do it, that people would run away from Trump. But if anything, I think most supporters thought this is such a BS case that, you know, they're not buying it. If it was a real felony, and this is where I think Trump is wrong, if he did shoot someone, you know, on a public street in New York, I think most of us would walk away from him. You know,
Yeah.
Almost everybody would. But when it's a case where, okay, you paid your lawyer to pay some porn star to keep quiet, which she didn't.
That was bad money. That was bad money, and that was a bad investment on his regard.
Right.
So.
It's not the best way to get her to keep quiet. I think she decided she could make more money elsewhere. And it was probably great when maybe she thought he wasn't going to win. I'll take your money.
Yeah.
But once he wins, that money's not good enough. And
Mm-hmm.
but yes, it's really a problem when prosecutors do that. And beyond going through that case, and I go through all of them, but and try to do it in a way where people can read it without having their eyes fall out, like it's law school, because that gets a little boring if you're just reading about that. But the bottom line is that hush money trial, as they were calling it, and I think that was the joke. Someone had said, "Why are they?" I think Trump said it's not hush money. She didn't stay quiet. It's like leave it to him to come up with the joke, but that's true.
Trump should have sued her for breach of contract, really, and that would have been hysterical in that regard. Well, I paid you this money and didn't keep quiet, so it's breach of contract in that regard.
Right, give my money back.
That's right.
At least recoup your money.
That's right. At least put that in there. Say, hey, she broke the contract, and that's her fault, not mine. So we're talking with Dennis Brennan, the author of, as I put it up, DC Swamp Strikes Back, Aaron Burr, Donald Trump, and their similar battles. There hasn't been another president, either a candidate and now in office, that has faced the amount of lawfare that Trump has faced in his years as a political figure, because we all know he was a public figure. No crime, no lawsuits, no nothing. None of this stuff was ever brought up. But as soon as he stepped down the escalator and wanted to get into politics, then all of these things magically appeared. As a historian and a lawyer, is there any time in U.S. presidential history that any president has faced even a smaller percentage of the kind of lawfare that Trump has faced?
No, there isn't. I mean, we've had impeachments, but we've never had the level that Trump had with all these cases. And really, I think you asked at the beginning, about why Burr. Burr is the closest thing. He's a vice president, but Burr had 2 trials for treason. One was dismissed, the other one he was acquitted on. He was vilified as a traitor. Well, if you're being called treasonous, we throw that around a lot now. What's treason? They actually had him accused of treason and had a witness, testifying. Unfortunately for them, they needed 2 witnesses. But so technically he couldn't be convicted. But that's the only guy that had as much legal issues. I mean, sure, you had Nixon have to resign, but under the threat that he'd be impeached. It's and some think he got a deal that, okay, well, we won't charge you with anything. Well, once he was pardoned, that kind of took any charging off the table. Would he have been charged? Who knows? I mean, it's so long ago. You read enough accounts and you hear people say, yes, Ford was afraid that he'd be charged, down the road. But yeah, there's no president that went through all this, or candidate, because, for Trump, it started with the various impeachments while he was in office, continued while he was out of office. Apparently, you would think most guys leave office, whether you're, a state rep somewhere or you're the president. We're done with you. We're not going to see you again. We figure you're done. They were not taking any chances with Trump. They were filing cases after case and minor, and you see the proof, like even the issue of, did he have classified documents? He probably did, because everybody has them. We've had people walk out of their offices stuck with documents stuck down their pants. We had Joe Biden with, he didn't even have a right to the documents, and he had them in his garage just stacked up there. I mean, to Trump's credit, at least he had them in a secure room with Secret Service at the building. But we stamp so many things classified. I have no doubt that he had classified material. Everybody does. I mean, they all seem to have it. And here's the only guy really charged under it, it's like. And I've told that to other people when they've asked about that, and they'll say, well, he's the only one that said he didn't have to give it back. I don't remember Biden saying I'm giving it back or even alerting them to it. It becomes after the fact. Oh, yeah, we might have some documents. Mike Pence had documents.
Yeah.
You know,
it is very, it's the worst kept secret in DC that everything is supposedly classified. So everybody's security clearances can go up higher. And when they leave their various government jobs, they use that security clearance for better salaries at lobbying firms. They go to these lobbying firms to say, hey, I have level 75B security clearance. And so that's why you want to hire me, because I can have access to all these things. The legacy media and Democratic politicians were making a joke, making a 4-alarm fire out of classified information when it's like after Edward Snowden's leak and all the other things that we've seen. It's like, really, there's not much classified. I mean, there's stuff that is definitely classified that we don't know about. But when we're talking about, well, the president's dinner schedule, that's a classified document. Like, really, we need to know what he had for brunch and all of these things are. And it's just another layer of that swamp, of that bureaucracy, to try and just make, the bubble as wide but as small as possible, if that makes sense. Because this, George Carlin said, it's a big club and you're not in it. And that's another way they make that you're that club is, hey, you have classified access and I have classified access. I don't have classified access to 72B, but you have 75C. And so it's just a mess.
Well, I think that's a great point too, because it's that, highway from government and the private sector where you're lobbying and you're in different businesses, and then you're sometimes coming back and you go back again, and each time you're picking up, more credentials, and it makes the swamp bigger, because now all these people, have somehow a credential, like, oh, I had whatever label you have, but I was top secret. I had this, special advisor to that. And it turns out someone's just sitting there with a stamp hitting classified, but everybody has it. How classified could it be? I mean, Trump at least had an argument, like, I'm the president, I declassified it. Now, whether he did it properly, that's for someone else to figure out. I mean, in his mind, I guess he could just say it is all declassified and it's done. But it makes you wonder what's in these documents. I mean, even the FBI, when they raided Mar-a-Lago, threw them all on took a photo op. What are you doing taking photos of classified documents? I don't get that. It seems to me couldn't be very secret. It's it gets us to this. It becomes a conspiracy theory of what's in there. And I saw some of that stuff, like he had like secret plans on how to bomb Iran, and I'm thinking, I know how to bomb Iran. What are we talking about?
I'm pretty sure he didn't come up with those. I'm pretty sure he didn't write that down one day. I'm sure that was been passed down from every president since the Iran-Contra crisis, or even before that. So I'm pretty sure that's just everybody in DC, everybody in the Pentagon probably has a copy in their desk, just in case it gets, in case it's the call. So
how classified is it? I mean, we don't have it because, like you said, George Carlin's, say we're not in that club. We're not. But everybody in Washington has it. It's kind of silly. And that might have been their best case. Some of these cases are just so bad, and then you start to think about like the election one in Atlanta or Georgia, where, and I have these arguments all the time with people, but he said, find me 13,000 votes. I'm like, well, yes, but he didn't say make them up. He didn't say create 13,000 votes or change the votes. He wanted a recount to show that's what he needed. Okay. I mean, there is an explanation to it. It's like, if you have any logical explanation, I'm going to give you a break on it and say, okay. Now, if you say, I don't care what you do, change the votes, throw out their votes. Okay. I'm not with you anymore. But I think he had an explanation of what he was saying.
It doesn't shock me when a politician says, hey, do a recount to make sure I won. I mean, if you want to go back all the way to the Kennedys, we know Pa Joe was making that phone call more than once to different states on Kennedy's election night, making sure, like, make sure those votes are counted. I don't care how many cemeteries you have to go to, but make sure those votes get counted. And it's just politics as usual. And I think that's the thing that Trump highlighted, is that this has been going on for a long time, possibly all the way back to the founding, because we know for a fact that the Jefferson Adams election, people think politics is bad now. Just read some of the newspaper things that Jefferson was saying about, like, Adams' mom, and Jefferson was, it was awful. It was awful back then. And it just seems that Trump has gotten under their skin, and it's crazy, Dennis, because Trump is such a people pleaser that if the Democrats had just acted normal towards him and said one or two nice things, he probably would have given them half of the stuff they wanted, because he's a deal guy, right? He's the art of the deal guy, and he wants to be this guy. I bring everybody together, and look how everybody works under me. And that's what you do. Is, my dad was in construction, and construction guys have to deal with all their subcontractors, and the electrician that doesn't, he can't see straight, but he can get the job done, and the plumber that's lazy but he does great work, so you kind of have to shepherd him around. And the fact that Democrats, I really think one of the greatest political blunders is the fact that they just went all in on a completely whacked out narrative that Trump, who was in the public eye for 40, 50, for a better part of his entire life, was morphed into Adolf Mussolini, Hitler in 24 hours. And it was just, it was a political blunder.
I agree. And, exactly what you're saying. I've told people the greatest regret they should have is this was the Republican, right? Because Trump wasn't a Republican. I mean,
he isn't still.
Right. There's like a new party. It's the Trumpians, or whatever you want to call it. And I don't know where the party goes after him. Maybe it's fine. Maybe because he's but only because the Democrats pushed it that way. To now, Trump has taken the Republican Party and kind of made it in his own image. Excuse the religious look of that, but it is. And he, I think when he first was there's no doubt when he ran in 2015 and when he was thinking about it, he had a lot of positions that were, I'd say, Democrat, very Democrat. Then I think he just looked at the, and people with him looked at it and said, hey, you can't win in the Democrat Party because they're going to ordain, Hillary Clinton. That's a done deal. And, the Republicans, they've got about 15 knuckleheads up there that are thinking they're going to run. If you join them with your celebrity and your personality, you got a chance here. And he bought into that. And I think, at that point, though, his mind was still, like you said, deal maker, more Democrat than Republican. Certainly not conservative like we've had. It wouldn't be like the Bush-Cheney years or Reagan. He wasn't of that ilk. And they missed a real opportunity to do something great for the country by working together. And we wouldn't be even talking about this, 60 votes in the Senate. They could have actually gone after real issues and said, okay, what can we agree on? There's got to be a lot of things we can agree on. Like, do we all want to end homelessness? Yes. How do we do that? We worry about, people having jobs here, which they used to be the Democrat, party. Like, you wanted the working man jobs here, factories and so forth. Trump wants it, so it's bad. How could that be? They've lost a lot of voters by just being against everything Trump is for. And I think had they teamed up with them, you can be against certain things, but my God, at some point, let's work on the things we agree with.
Yeah, they could have easily argued policy positions. And I don't think anybody would have had a problem if you disagree with Trump on policy positions. But then it was personal. It was just so personal. And the fact is that the Democrats had a gift. Trump would have run as a Democrat, but that position, if you think about it, they've run women in 2 out of the last 3 election cycles. And, there's a debate on whether if AOC is at the top of the ticket in the next one or who else is, depending on that, that shift away from white patriarchal figures, whatever they want to, whatever slang terms they want to use. And so they kind of just booted that gift. It's like when you have a 5-star recruit walk onto your campus and he's like, I want to play quarterback for whatever. And you're like, yeah, but we like 6'2" quarterbacks and you're 6'1". So no, we're not going to have you. And then he goes to another campus and he just lights up the world on fire. And that the fan base always goes, why can't we get quarterbacks like that? And it's like, well, you did. And it's kind of the same way with Trump now. And it's an absolute, that maybe that's why they're so scorned. Maybe that's why they have such vitriol, because he could have potentially been the one that got away.
Yeah, he could have been. I mean, yeah, he certainly would have ran as a Democrat had there been a path there for him, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And, who knows? The party might have been much, much stronger. I think all of this fighting with Trump has made them move even more to the left and lose people. Now, yeah, short term, they've picked up some of the progressive younger people that, don't know any better, for lack of they want to be socialists, but they're not sure what a socialist is. That's a problem. But, a lot of those, as they get older, even just a little bit older, they're realizing, well, that's silly. Socialism doesn't work. And this last election, a lot of those, especially young men, came to the Republican Party. They never were there.
The thing with the socialists and the younger voter right now, I don't think the tried and true statement of was the Churchill quote: "If you don't have a heart when you're younger, you have no. If you're not a progressive when you're younger, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative when you're younger, you have no brain." I don't know if that really works anymore, because Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they're facing an economy that's bleak. They're facing a future where they can't afford a home. They're facing a lot of economic problems. And yes, you and I know everything Mondani is promising, like, faster buses and free health care. It's a fantasy and it's a dream, but they don't know that. And they're also looking at somebody that's at least, acknowledging them and promising to help them. And the conservatives and Trump, and I think Trump is trying with tariffs. I'm a American protectionist account. I'm fine with tariffs, but I don't think people understand how it's working. And right now we're kind of suffering through a little bit of an economic squeeze. I think 2026 is going to be very difficult for a lot of people as we, because Biden kicked that recession down the road. And, of course, so did Bush, so did Obama, so did Trump, everybody. And I think it's eventually going to come to a head somewhere. But I think the Republican Party has a very difficult time coming up with younger voters. I don't think they can count on, because what was one of the things you said that, one of the things about getting older is you buy a house, you get married, you have children, and then you're starting like, wow, I'm paying property taxes. This is the worst thing on the planet. I have children. I don't want my children to be indoctrinated. If they're not having houses and they're not having children, all the things that conservatives kind of count on for them to reel back to reality, for lack of a better term, those factors don't exist right now.
Yeah, it's not only it's real back to reality, and it's also thinking of someone but yourself. Because when you're young, what do you think of? I'm having a good time. I'm going out. I'm like, and I have a little bit of a funny story. When I worked for the state of Illinois early in my legal career, and we had a legal intern, and he was very much, I don't think progressive really existed then, but he was very liberal, and I was not. And that became clear. We're talking, and, but we were paying our interns. So this guy got his first check and he came over. I was in a cubicle and he comes over to me and he says, "What is this?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, they're taking all this money." And I'm like, "Welcome to the Republican Party. Those are taxes. That's what you pay." He was astounded that so much is being taken out. He wasn't making much, but I thought that's how you find out, to that point where you go, wait a minute, I'm all for that, but I thought they were taking your money.
Yeah.
I thought Rick was paying for it, not me. Why am I paying for it? I don't make enough. And no matter how much they make, that's their thought process. And we still see it with this, pushed by people like AOC and Bernie Sanders with the oligarchy. Oh, the oligarchy. And, we're going to get all the money from Elon Musk. What? Even if he gave everybody, I don't know I forget how much money he has, but it's not that much he could give us all and have nothing. It's like, here's your $26. That's not going to work. Much better that he keeps creating things to make, different businesses work, employ people, hopefully,
Mhm.
um, you know, make society better, and maybe we'll all be better off.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. The final question I have for you today, Dennis, is everybody's worried about the midterms coming up because if Trump loses the House, the impeachment proceedings come, and then if a Democrat comes in 2028, a lot of people fear that the lawfare we saw on Trump was just a taste of what the Democrats and the liberals are apparently gearing up to unleash on everybody that supported Trump in 2024. We're talking about Musk and some of the political leaders and some of the business personnel and just everyday people that have spoken out. Do you take that? How do you look at it from a legal perspective? That idea, that theme that people are kind of like, we got to get the House in 2026 because if we don't, Trump's going to be impeached. And if we lose the presidency in 2028, it's open season on all of us.
Yeah, I understand how people are worried about it, and I'm not sure it's getting any better. I do fear that this is how we become now, right? Politics in the United States, they've started it with Trump. You can make the argument that some of the cases now being filed by Trump are vindictive. Some would say they're not even proper. Personally, I think like these mortgage cases, if you put down in a mortgage application, that it's your residence, your primary residence, and you don't live there, yeah, that is mortgage fraud. You got a better rate,
Mm.
but it's all how people look at things, right? And, Republicans generally looked at those cases filed against Trump as these are nothing. And you had Democrats saying, but he's 34 felonies. You've got a felon because they thought that would work.
Mhm.
I do think, yes, they'll double down and they'll use, anything they can to come after everybody around Trump. So, you know, they've already proven that once. Unfortunately, is that what our government becomes? Is that what politics becomes? That we're, who's ever in power is going to go after their enemies? Because now we do become that third world country where we jail presidents and, dissidents where, you'd always have someone, in Russia or in South America where, oh, he's the dissident, yes, what happened? Well, he's in prison because he was
Yeah.
convicted of whatever. I'm like, I'd hate to see that, even though there's a lot of people that I dislike. I still don't want to see them going after them unless there's a real crime. And I think that was the problem with Trump, like, with the cases against Trump. If they were real cases, I'm all for it. If he did something, put him in prison, but if it's not, and you're just making these things up to dirty him up, that just leads to the next guy, who turns out to be him, going after you, whether it's Comey or Letitia James or whoever. I hope they're real cases. I hope there's real evidence because otherwise we're taking our legal system down. And I think the country, you're making it weaker by doing that.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot there that we just have to wait and see what happens. So with that, we're gonna wrap up. It's been a quick hour. Time flies when you're able to kind of delve into these issues. We'll put the book back up, but where else can people find you, sir?
Well, on my website is authordennisbrennan.com. The book's available there. It's also available on Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble. And as they say, where all good books are sold. And I'm on X. It's Dennis Brennan 61. I'm also on Facebook, and I have no idea what that is, but it's there's not that many Dennis Brennans. So, and my photo's there, so you can find me that way.
Excellent. Well, sir, we appreciate you having us on. Hopefully you guys run out and get that book. And we were very happy to have you on this tonight. We thank you for coming on. We will talk to you all next time here on the Barrett Breakdown, folks. Thank you for hanging out with us. If you like these kind of interviews, like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell. Make sure you share the show out with everybody you know. God bless and Viva Cristo Rey.